right. So I was unable to make it to last week, but I did put on the text thread kind of the update that we've seen kind of progress a little since last week. So prior to that, we had our first Fed meeting with our new Fed chair, and we saw rates kind of spike up a bit. But following that, we saw a weekend jobs report that came in that helped kind of turn it the other way and improve rates a little bit. So we've kind of seen that improvement over the last week or so here. This week, nothing that would realistically have a big impact on what mortgage rates will do for this week. Um, so right now, conventional rates are about 6.5%. Your FHA, VA, Govy rates are about 5.875. Again, it's all dependent on credit scores, property type. Are you refinancing? Are you purchasing? So that's kind of where rates are right now. For the rest of the month, July 9th is the NAR, existing home sales and initial jobless claims reports. That comes out again on the 9th. Won't have too much impact on what rates do. But then going forward next week, July 14th is the CPI report and the 15th is the PPI. Those are both big indicators on inflation where we're at, and we'll kind of control what rates are going to do. And then on the 29th, end of the month, will be our next Fed meeting, and we'll see if rates are going to be increased. Hopefully not. So we'll see with that. We are still offering the 1.0 buy down, seller paid 1.0 buy down for buyers. So keep that in mind when you are talking to your clients, or like Chastity and I've speaking about the last day or so. If you have a listing that's been sitting, a little incentive for a new buyer. And then something I've been seeing of late, or the last like 2 weeks, and it's just a good reminder that we should all be working our databases, because most of our database does have a good amount of equity in their homes. And with the growing amount of inventory in the market, I am seeing clients pulling money from their current homes and either buying another primary residence or an investment property, or flipping, uh, departing their current residence to make that the investment, and living in the new property. So just a great reminder to hit those databases. You can do those follow-up calls and get them excited about how much equity they've gained. Also, too, in last week, I had noted that even though home sale prices, I think, was down like 0.01% overall since last year, we're still up about 2%. So even buying, regardless of the negativity, where rates are and home prices, and all these people that are sitting on the fence, properties are still appreciating in almost all areas. So if you need me for anything for the remainder of the week, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you need help prepping for an open house, flyers, anything, please utilize me. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Scott, I
All
have
right.
a question for you. Thank you very much for the update.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding the if a buyer asks for seller to pay for a buy down on their loan,
Mhm.
right? Because as I understand it, if a buyer wants to do a temporary buy down or maybe a permanent one too, and I'm not entirely sure, they can't pay for it themselves, correct? They have to have
Uh,
either the seller or the lender pay for it.
a permanent buy down, the buyer can pay. On a
Okay.
temporary buy down, it has to come from seller, agent, or lender.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Um, if they do ask for that in
Mhm.
their offer, right? Not necessarily, is it best to put it in the offer as a credit towards the buyer's closing costs and not specify necessarily what it's for? That way, if for some reason they change their mind, they can just use it for other closing costs.
Uh,
Or,
you you can do it that way. Previously, when so temporary rate buy downs have been around, but in 22, when they started becoming more prevalent again and being used because of what rates we're doing. You had to be specific in the verbiage, but now you can just state it a credit towards the buyer's closing cost, and the buyer can use it for whatever they'd like, whether it's the rate buy down or towards their closing cost.
Okay, excellent. That was one question. The other is there a cap to how much they can get from a seller on that?
Uh, so not well on your closing cost, yes. Your, FHA is going to be a 6% max total concession towards the buyer. Conventional financing is 3% unless you're putting down 10% or more, then you can get up to 6%. But for the uh, temporary rate buy down, it's calculated based on the rate that they're going to lock and those savings. So those are going to be two different amounts. So let's just say you get a $15,000 credit and the buy down totals only 10,000. They can use that remainder to buy the rate down even more on the permanent side or have it go towards closing cost.
Okay, gotcha. And when you say a max of 3% or 6%, that's just for the seller providing a credit to the buyers. It's not for any request where the buyer says, I want the seller to pay for my agent's compensation, right? It doesn't include that.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Two different.
Two different numbers. Okay,
Yep.
okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to
So
double check and make sure. Yeah.
yeah, and then that percentage is based on the sales price. So on an FHA loan, that buyer can get 6% of the sales price, and then you as the agent can still make your 3% or whatever it is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Of course. You're welcome.
All right, good question.
All right.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Scott. I
Of
appreciate
course.
your time. Did you send out a flyer with the 1% promotion that you're doing?
Not as a, did I send it out as a group? I'll put it on the thread right now and I'll email it. I know I think I only sent it to Ashley maybe, and then Chastity I have one doing. But I'll share a generic one on the thread if you'd like it co-branded. Just let me know and I can have those done.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, you're very welcome.
All right, well, we have a treat for you here today. We have Luisa with us, and she's going to talk about escrow, what causes delays, the process that escrow goes through, maybe answer some of those questions about terminology, things that maybe you don't know what they're talking about when they use certain terms. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up just the timeline.
That'd be great.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to hand it over to Luisa, and we're going to have a really good training. Okay. So where's inbox? Come on.
Well, you should have
Oh,
it.
inbox. Here we
I
go.
did send it.
There it is.
There it is. Thank you.
Open. Open. All right, there it is. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share this. All righty, there we go. All right, can everybody see that? And there you go. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So yep, let's hear it for Luisa. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope everyone had a great 4th of July. If I'm looking up, it's because I'm reading some of the documents to go over and discuss with you. So as you see here, we've prepared a customary escrow timeline, which is a standard in an ideal setting is the standard 30-day escrow. Some of you might question the day zero. I had someone already question that day zero. Oh, wait, day zero, not day one. So day zero is the day that you already pre-listing, let's say, right? You're already working, you've already worked your file, whether that's representing a seller or representing a buyer, you're ready to open escrow. So you're preparing all the documentation, gathering all the documentation to provide over to the escrow holder so that we're able to abstract all that information in order to move forward and continue typing the escrow instructions to incorporate them jointly with the residential purchase agreement. With that being said, on day one, sometimes escrow is open the actual day that the offer is accepted. That can be day one or between day 0 and day 3. So again, this is just me trying to be on top of everything, ahead of everything, as opposed to the more realistic timeline. So between day 0 and day 3, we have the process of preparing the contract, providing them to both parties, getting them signed, and by day 3, you provide the contract to the escrow company, ideally before that, as soon as you have it signed by both parties. But day 3 is our timeline. In the contract, it states that the buyer is to deposit the initial earnest money deposit within 3 business days after acceptance. So by day 3, escrow should already have the initial deposit by the buyer in order to pull an escrow number and officially type escrow instructions. And that takes place on the initial follow-up, which is day 3. So we're talking about from day 0 to day 3, within that time frame, we're trying to get the contract fully executed by both parties, initial money deposit from the buyer, and advise escrow that you already have a contract accepted so that we can issue the wire instructions and provide it to the buyer so that he can send the money, and then we can proceed to type the escrow instructions. So that's usually what takes place between day 0 and day 3. The escrow is open. The opening package is usually incorporates the escrow wire instructions to the buyer, so that between day 2 and day 3, the buyer can deposit their earnest money deposit with escrow. On day 3, if it's not in, I'm following up with the buyer to make sure that their deposit is in. If it's not in by that day, usually whichever party will extend and say, we're okay with the buyers sending a deposit an additional day. Sometimes I have, depending on the agent, and they're really time sensitive, I'll get agents to even go as far as saying, make sure that's amended within your escrow instructions. There's some agents that way, but there's also flexibilities depending on, I'll give you a perfect example with an initial earnest deposit delayed today, because when an offer was accepted, they didn't realize that July 3rd, Friday, was considered a holiday. So because the agent didn't take into consideration that there was a holiday, the initial deposit rolled over an additional day. So we had to point that out and say, well, technically it's a holiday. So yes, in the contract it says business day, but if it's a holiday observed, it rolls over to the next business day. So that's what I mean with sometimes there's a flexibility there if there's a holiday. So when preparing contracts or accepting contracts, your acceptance date and your initial deposit 3 business date, always just double check those timelines and see if that falls within a holiday. That way you can be considerate also of the buyer that it's a banking holiday, so the bank is closed. I had the buyers, they couldn't go to the bank on Friday, they couldn't go to the bank on Saturday, so they're going into the bank today to take care of that initial deposit. So the seller was willing to extend the initial deposit to July 8th because of this holiday. Everyone took 3 to 4 days off. So they were being nice and being flexible with the buyer. The buyer's out of state as well, so sometimes we have to consider those things. Where is the buyer located? Is it a bank holiday within that timeline? And always make sure to have that communication with escrow so that escrow is aware of those timelines as well, so that we can be in compliance and typing up the escrow instructions and providing the wire instructions to the buyer. Now on day 4 and 5, that's typically within the 1 and 3 days when escrow is open. Title is also open jointly. That's usually done conjointly. So by the 4th and 5th day, I'm following up with title to see where we are with the preliminary title report, whether it's come in. If it's come in, we make sure to review the preliminary title report, verify the current ownership, verify all the lien holders, if there's any holdups with easements, taxes, title exceptions, any clouded title. We're reviewing that within that first week timeline, because remember, from day 0 to day 7, we have to provide escrow title and deliver preliminary title report and disclosure, seller documents, right? So we have to provide seller documents over to the buyer. And escrow is only involved with that when it comes to the preliminary title report. Once the preliminary title report is issued within that 7-day period, escrow is to forward the preliminary title report to the buyer and the buyer's lender within that 7-day, so that they have the opportunity to also review the prelim and inspect the prelim. So that falls in day 7 on the inspection check. That's also incorporated within title, within whatever's on your contract regarding repairs or inspections. That's usually how it's coordinated within the 7 days. If I'm being provided with disclosures, HOA documents to order, that's being done within that timeline. So between the 7-day and 11 to 14 days, the inspection and loan progress, between the 7-day and the 14 days, it's escrow responsibility to help title clear all encumbrances. So that means payoff releases, reconveyances, making sure we have all invoices that are clouded in title in, so that we can provide that to title, so that title can eliminate that from the preliminary title report and issue a preliminary title supplement report to provide to the buyer and the lender, so that we can say, hey, we're aware of all these liens. We have received the invoices, we have received the demands, we have received the payoff statements. Title is aware. These items are eliminated because we have what we need, and they're going to be paid and free of title when we transfer title over to the buyer. So payoff demands, HOA liens, invoices, inspections, all of that, anything that has to do with money that's going to be paid through the transaction between the 7-day and the 14-day, anything that's clouded in title, you want to make sure that escrow has everything they need from your principals, so that we can clear title and transfer over a clear prelim to the lender and the buyer. So that way on day 15 and day 18, the lender's already reviewing then all of that for pre-closing review. So once we reach the pre-closing review, which is between the 15-day and the 18th day, the buyer and the sellers and the lenders, they're reviewing all the documents that were provided and exchanged among each other. And usually I'm the third party and I'm the messenger, that they send it to me and I send it to them, or they send it to me and I send it to them. So I'm in between delivering the documentation if they come to escrow. Sometimes the buyer and sellers agents exchange that directly, and all they do is just provide the invoice to escrow, so that invoice that has to be paid through escrow is an escrow, so that I'm aware that there's an invoice being paid for certain documentation provider, whether that's HOAs or a termite inspection, for example, or home warranty, or natural disclosure invoice, fire insurance invoice. It can be credit card bills that the buyer's paying, any credit cards through the transaction, through the loan. That's usually takes place during that pre-closing review. So anything that has to do with money paid through escrow at closing, you want to make sure all the final invoices are in between, again, ideally between the 14-day and the 21-day. Sometimes escrow doesn't get it all in that time frame, so that's why I've broken down in sections. Sometimes it's between day 18 and day 21. So between day 18 and day 21, you want to make sure all the final invoices are in escrow. CDAs, for example, broker commission instructions with the CDAs, if commissions are being paid, payoff statements for the seller, liens are going to be paid, Any repairs that the seller is paying, termite inspection invoices, home warranty, and NHD, that needs to be submitted. And then on the buyer's side, if they have notaries they're going to incur, fire insurance that they're going to incur, if their lenders have fees that they're going to incur. So any fees that are to be paid through escrow for each principal within that timeline, all invoices and final invoices should be submitted to escrow between the 18th and the 21st. That would be ideal. That way, the escrow company we can prepare the settlement statement and provide it to the lender to prepare the loan documents, and we can move into the 22nd day, which should be loan signing. So between the 22nd day and the 24th day, ideally, escrow is going back and forth with the lender, preparing loan documentation so that the buyer can sign their documentation, providing title wire instructions so that the buyer can, ensure that the lender sends the money to the right title company and not escrow, for example. Sometimes we have those situations, and it'll give me, and it's okay if they send it to escrow, but then it also gives me enough time to reroute that money back to the title company. And that can take a day or two, depending. And again, timelines with banks, if there's specific standard time, if they're East Coast, if money closing funds are coming from an outside foreigner Merrill Lynch account from New York or China somewhere, we all want to make sure that between the 22nd and the 24th, anything regarding money coming to escrow for closing, everyone's hands on. That way, by day 25, the buyer can fully authorize and say, okay, and seller, we're all in agreement. All the money is in. We're okay to continue moving with the authorization to have the lender send their funds to title and finalize the lender funding and the buyer funding as well, because sometimes the buyer has to come in with closing funds. So we're taking care of between day 25 and 26, we're taking care of the buyer's closing funds, all the authorizations to close, make sure both parties are in agreement to continue with the closing, and then also the lender funding, which is the final authorization for us to close the transaction. So that would be ideal on day 26, and then we would move it over to day 27th, which would be the recording date. So the recording date is the date that the title confirms that the deeds have transfer of ownership has been completed. And usually we get a confirmation. If there's any leftover chunk change, which I call it, or lunch money, the title company sends it back to us so that we can disperse it accordingly to everyone. Pay out all the brokers and make sure everyone gets their itemized refunds back if that's reflected not on the settlement statement. Once that's done, then we move over to the closing packages, which is day 29. On day 29, usually I'm wrapping up all the final documentation. If the transaction coordinators are requesting documentation for their files in order to make sure they're in compliance, if they're missing anything from either party, if they haven't requested the documents from them directly, sometimes they'll ask escrow to play messenger and ask for the documentation. And I can do that as well if you're not requesting the documents directly from the principal you're looking for those documents from. So that's usually what happens on day 29, where I'm preparing the closing packages, copies of final closing statements, copies of final closing documents, and the congratulatory emails letting everyone know we've officially closed and congratulate everyone that the escrow's closed. Now, on my day 30, that's when I usually do the final audit to make sure I'm in compliance. So if I have anything missing, which I shouldn't, knock on wood, I don't usually request anything, but if there's anything missing, I usually make sure to pre-audit my file before the 30th day. So I'm already on day 18. I'm checklisting a lot. I have a check sheet where I check sheet everything that's in escrow compliance. So that way on day 30, I'm not running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to get everything on my department with compliance. So that's usually an ideal 30-day escrow. Sometimes we have them extended. They can go 30 to 35 days, sometimes 40 days. It really all depends on how much activity you have within that transaction, right? If it's a clean file. Like I'll give you an example. I have a new escrow that just opened. It's a 2-week escrow, and it's ready to go. I can close it this week because title's free and clear. Buyer has their money ready to go. Seller has provided everything. So if they really wanted to, I can close it within this week. But again, buyer is out of state, so he needs time to have everything organized. So that's why it's a 2-week escrow. So this wouldn't apply to my 2-week escrow. This would be like shrunk. But this would be ideal processing for me. Now, most escrow companies don't work this way. Some of them they don't start from day 0, they start at day 3. I try to be on top of things as much as possible and have as much upfront communication with my agents as much as possible, even pre-listing. We're getting to a point now because the way how the industry is changing and we're running into people losing their jobs or not paying bills on time. I have this one transaction where they didn't pay their business license on time. So the business, there's a business fee for $500 tied to the title. So now I have to work on releasing and getting a demand to clear that business petition fee of $500 for the seller. But those are little holdups that could hold escrow up on trying to obtain documentation, things like that. But if we start getting into a customary for our agents when they do a listing, if they start ordering prelims or even a title search, they can kind of have an idea of what they're working with, on how clouded title might be and how challenging if it might be for escrow and also the principal party to give a clear title to the buyer. So we want to make sure that when you accept an offer, that you're also communicating with your title company and title rep, doing property searches, making sure to see more or less what you're working with as far as liens on the property. That way it can give escrow as much information beforehand to help title clear those items. Sometimes we have child support liens, mechanics liens, list pendants, arbitration that no one's aware of until the prelim shows up 7 days later. And that's when the buyer can come back and say, well, we weren't aware of all this at the time we made an offer. So they can provide a notice to perform or say we want to back out because they're still within their timeline to do so. So my recommendation as a practice, moving forward, a good habit would be asking title to do a title search for you and ensure to see what you're working with on liens on the property and see how difficult and complex that file might be. If it's a regular payoff, then that's great. Then we know, okay, regular payoff, that payoff demand could come in within 3 to 5. Some payoff lenders are 3 to 5 business days. Some lenders are 7 to 7 business days. That's another thing we also wanted to take in consideration. Who is the principal lender that holds title to that property? Mr. Cooper, for example, they can provide a payoff statement within 1 to 2 business days, right? If you're dealing with a federal credit union, for example, sometimes it's 3 to 5 business days. So we have to always consider those timelines on providing those specific documentations per the contract on behalf of our principal to the other principal to make sure we're all within our contingency timelines to clear all that up so that no one's in a position to notice to perform or to lose their deposit and vice versa. So that's ideally how we would want our escrow processes to go moving forward. If anyone has any questions, let me know. I can pause here now if you want to go over maybe like the first initial part or the middle or last. If anyone's open for questions, I'm open for questions so we can discuss a couple of the processes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Or actually, it's just a statement. You were talking about getting a prelim as soon as you get that listing.
Yes.
There's actually another reason why you want to do that. If you're not going to run a property profile, which you can also do, but that will tell you if the seller is really authorized to sell that property, because you run into these situations sometimes that are an uninsured deed was recorded, and escrow actually has to go back over those. If it was an uninsured deed, which means they just recorded a quitclaim deed or something at the recorder's office without the benefit of opening an escrow or buying title insurance. If you have a situation like that, it doesn't mean, I mean, escrow actually has to go and verify that that was done correctly and legally. So it's like, you don't really get to just do that. You know, the next time it goes into the escrow officer is actually having to do 2 transfers to
Correct.
get up to, you know, where you're at today, transferring the property to the new buyer. So that is one good reason also too, that you want to get that listing prelim.
Absolutely.
And if you're not working with a title officer now, pick one or pick a couple that you want to work with, and they will be on it. I mean, a lot of times they'll even send you, you know, I see you have a new listing. Would you like the listing package? And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about getting you that listing prelim. So that's just another good reason to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That again, that goes hand in hand with title and escrow working together. Is trying to get as much information on the property and the current owner, so that we can help give a clear transfer ownership to the buyer. And ultimately, that's title and escrow's responsibility is to clear title for the seller and for the buyer, and also to handle all monetary in the transaction. So all invoices, anything that has to do with money must be submitted to escrow and title unless it's paid outside of escrow. We have situations where the appraisals are paid outside of escrow. Sometimes the homeowner decides to pay their insurance policy right away that day because they happen to be there right there and then with their insurance rep, and they get a better deal. They pay it on the spot for the next year. So there's times where I have received also paid invoices, and even though they are paid, it's please ensure that they're submitted to the title company so that we can reflect those paid invoices on our final statements as well, to let the lender, if there's a lender involved and they're requiring for those items to be paid, to prove to the lender, hey, we have paid all of this. This has all been taken care of, and then they continue moving forward with the final final funding approval. So that's part of all that incorporated within all that, the money and clearing title. Any other questions?
Other questions from anyone?
I do have a question, Luisa. Thank you for your clarity. There was an instance where we needed an SI before you could order. Was it the preliminary, or was it something else we needed the SI for?
Yes, so usually when the prelim comes in, the title company attaches their SI to the prelim. So sometimes you will see in the preliminary title report, the title company has their own statement of information, and that's usually because they're ready to date down the property. So they're asking you, hey, can you have your seller complete this so that we can do a deep search? And sometimes I'll request it before the prelim goes out. So it goes on my initial opening package. So by the 7th day the prelim comes in, I already have my own SI. So that would be ideal. If I have some agents that they incorporate in their listing packages, they already incorporate the SI, a seller's authorization form, and which includes a form which the seller gives you, who's the payoff lender on the property, is there solar on the property, all their information. So by the time it comes to escrow in the opening, escrow is ready to go, because once I have that, I can submit that immediately over to the title with my opening request. So by the time the prelim comes in, if title can catch it before they even draw up a prelim. And I've had that done before too, where I have an instance where a title rep would say, hey, we received your SI and all of that before we release the prelim. Can you verify these items? And they'll go based on that. And that's because they have the SI prior to even preparing the preliminary title report. So they can catch things beforehand and clear things before they issue their actual prelim. So having an SI and a seller's authorization form at the time of your listing package would be beautiful, because by the time you give that to escrow, and escrow opens title, we just forward that over to title. So then within that 3 to 7 day time frame, the title is doing their date down, and if they catch everything and everything's good, they can give a clear prelim, and the buyer, the buyer's good with it because we've already taken care of those items preliminary title report. So ideally, it would be beneficial, and I think a great way to start your listings is by obtaining the seller's authorization form and a statement of identity, because that helps you immediately identify who the real sellers of the property are.
I appreciate that so much. Is there a way that you can send us over copies of those so we can add them to our listing package?
Absolutely. That would be fantastic. I will send over those documents.
Thank
Well, we're
you.
actually, oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but we're actually working on a package that we can let all the agents have, so that when you're putting your listing together, everything that Luisa needs beforehand and that makes everything a lot smoother will be in that package. So we're actually putting that package together now.
And remember, everyone, I know that sometimes you don't have the option to choose escrow if you're representing the buyer or seller and whatnot. And just incorporating those as a standard practice in your listing packages, or vice versa in your buyer's packages as well, it would help that escrow company and title company clear your principal as soon as possible. And it also happens with the buyer, believe it or not, that's why we request SIs from the buyer, because there will be times where the title company will run the buyer's SI, and then the buyer has some forbidden thing on their credit, like, okay, they can't buy a house because they owe child support, or they can't travel outside the country because they have something on their record. So title will take down all of the principles on the transaction to ensure the principles are all within financially compliant and that they're not coming into their assets with debt. So that's one of the things also why the title company requests the SI from both parties at the time they issue the preliminary title report.
That's really great information. Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, one more question. One time at closing, I was delayed because my buyer was on the terrace list. Had I have done the SI before, is that something that would have been caught?
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know. All right.
Yes. So that's why for me as an escrow holder, it's crucial that from day 1 to day 7, when I issue the escrow instructions and lock in an escrow opening appointment with the buyer or the seller, that gives me the opportunity to have the buyer and the seller fill out that SI. So when they leave my office, I just send that to the title company and they'll do a date down right there and then. Which is great. So that would be ideal for me if my buyer and seller are coming and sitting down with me from day 1 and day 7, like that timeline, so that we can get, even if they don't sit down, but as long as we get the SI, that alone is going to help tremendously in our transaction. It'll let us know so much about what's going on behind the scenes. And if there's going to be hiccups in our transaction moving forward to close.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, where'd you leave off?
Oh, we're answering questions about the
you
SI,
finished?
if it's beneficial for also the buyer to provide the SI as soon as possible. So yes, in my opinion, the escrow holder would want the SI from both parties, both principal parties to the transaction within that 7-day timeline. So when I do prepare my opening package, all those documents are in there. The buyer's vesting form is also in there. That's another thing that I would like to bring up, the buyer's vesting. I sent out the buyer's vesting form from day 1 on my opening package. And I had a buyer come in on day 5 to sign their escrow instructions, and as they were signing their buyer vesting form, they had no idea. They did not know how to take title. And I cannot advise on how to take title. They can seek their CPA or their agent representative to request, ask them what's the ideal. But there's times where the buyer will tell escrow, we're going to take title, husband and wife joint tenants, and then there's a change towards the end at loan documentation on day 22nd where they say, oh no, we want to change because the lender decided we're going to go into a trust. So then all the documentation has to be changed. So then there's a crunch line to try to rectify that and change a buyer's vesting. And it's usually not, it takes 1 or 2 days, but those are just like the small delays. Like it can be a day delay. That's why we want to ensure that we have the SI and as much information as possible within that first week of opening escrow, so that we can all be ahead of the game, so that there's less things to correct towards the end and less things to change towards the end. So we want to advise our buyers and sellers to have as much information as possible up front, and not wait to the last minute to provide information to the escrow holder or the title company, because sometimes it's not even myself as the escrow holder, is the title company requesting this information in order for them to ensure the title and title policy over to the buyer. They won't issue owners or outside policies without making sure all these documents are clear to go and in compliance.
I have a question, Celeste. There's a few contingency in the process. Within the contingency, if nothing happened and it failed of escrow, who's paying for it?
I'm sorry, if nothing happens within the contingencies, repeat that again.
Let's say the buyers fail inspection and the buyer walk away. Escrow is already open and titles already run. Who's paying for that if the buyer walk away?
Well, okay, so that's a good question. So that's a reason why a standard practice is that the escrow holder doesn't type the escrow instructions until they obtain the earner's money deposit. And the reason why is because I don't work for free. Within my escrow instruction, it states there that if there's a cancellation, there is going to be cancellation charges. And if someone has demanded payment, whether that file is canceled or not, it is my obligation to pay those invoices from the earnest money deposit. So that would include escrow cancellation or an inspection fee if it's demanded to be paid from either party. That includes any payouts at the time that the escrow gets canceled. If there's any demand, sometimes there's times where there'll be a demand into escrow for an inspection, and the buyer or seller, they're like, no, we're not going through with this transaction and we don't want to pay that inspection fee. And those become a little complicated because then that's when escrow can't release the earnest money deposit unless all parties are in agreement and complying with to release the earnest money deposit. So it really is up to the parties to decide who's going to pay for what, and to provide that to escrow and say, okay, well, we're going to decide to cancel this transaction and there's a fee that still needs to be paid. Seller's responsible or buyer's responsible. And it is really up to them to determine whether that money is coming from the earnest money deposit already in escrow, or if seller's paying it, if they're going to bring in that money to escrow to pay it, or if they're just going to pay it outside of escrow and then give me the instruction just to refund the money back to the seller and cancel the transaction and cancellation instructions and move forward. But it all depends on the parties, how they agree, who's paying for what. Ultimately, I have to follow instructions as soon as both parties agree. So once both parties agree and I know what to do with the earnest money deposit, then I pay everyone accordingly. Escrow cancellation fees, title for general, they don't charge cancellation fees. They prepare prelims, again, customer as a complimentary before pre-listing or at the time they're issuing the title insurance. But as far as escrow goes, 9 out of 10 times, most escrow companies do charge a cancellation fee for their time and preparing all the documentation and for making calls for payoffs during that timeline. It's a lot of work. So some escrow companies, you'll see within their escrow instructions, they charge anywhere from $100 to $500 cancellation fee.
Even though cancellation is not based on the buyer's fault. For example, let's say they're not agreed on the selling price or the loan fell through. That still have to come through from the buyer and the seller from the initial deposit taken out from there?
No, if the seller decides to pay for that, I mean, it doesn't come out of the initial deposit because that's technically the buyer's money. So the seller will usually sends the $200 or $300 to escrow just to cancel the file and issue the money back to the buyer.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Because I have a few transactions when it didn't go through and I never received any information about cancellation. So that's why from the buyer side, not from the seller side. So
You definitely, in order to cancel, all parties have to receive cancellation instructions and say, hey, we wish to cancel, whether that's in through email or as long as the escrow holder is notified, like we're canceling this transaction, it is escrow's obligation that at the day either party decides to cancel, there has to be cancellation instructions drawn. So like say example, even if your seller's not aware, right? Seller hasn't had any communication with escrow at this point, but buyer's like, you know what? I don't want to go with this file, so I want to cancel. So it is my responsibility to type the cancellation instructions and then notify the seller. I have a notification to cancel this escrow. The buyer's willing to cancel. Here are my cancellation instructions. Do you agree with this? And then the seller has to sign the actual cancellation instructions in order for me to release the cancellation. But to be in compliance, it has to be officially canceled. So both parties have to sign cancellation instructions to cancel a file and just move forward. But if you do not have signed cancellation instructions, you still have an open file, a pending file. So you want to make sure, you want to make sure you cancel them out.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so you got all the way to day 30?
Oh yeah.
I have a quick question,
We're going back
Luisa.
with questions. Yes, Monica.
About right at the end when buyers usually come in and sign closing docs, the loan documents and all that stuff. Are you an authorized notary? Do you do that there at the office, or do you have a notary come in for that, or have a notary go to them? I mean, I know it's always an option to have a notary go to them, but I was wondering if you can also do that yourself.
Yes, I'm actually have not renewed my notary. So I'm not going to renew my notary.
Oh, okay.
I've held my notary license for 25 years. So I decided this year I was not going to renew it, but we do have notaries here. We have notaries in-house available for our clients to sit down and have the documents notarized here at the office. We have 2 in-house notaries that we can utilize. And we also have outside third-party notary companies that I've used and that are vetted through the title company. Because there is some title companies, I don't know how you have been working, but I know some, for example, Stewart Title and Fidelity Title, sometimes they vet their notaries, and if their notaries are not approved through their program, they'll let the escrow officer know, hey, this notary is not approved through us, so we prefer for you to use a notary that is approved. And on the preliminary title report, the title company discloses the affiliated businesses, and they give you a list of all the even notary services that you can use through the transaction that they've already vetted out as well. So ideally, we would want to keep everything here in person to make sure that we're identifying our clients, that there is no fraud being committed. So ideally, we would want the principals to be in the presence of the escrow and the notary. That would be ideal. We know that now because of technology and everyone, getting used to doing things online or outside of an office setting and in their homes, We could accommodate a notary to also travel to them, but it has to be an approved vetted notary from the title company. 9 out of 10 times I'm coming into that now because of the fraud, of so much fraud going on with title and all of that.
Okay, okay. And the only reason I ask is that I know it's come up before where I've had buyers say, "Well, hey, can we just come into the escrow office and sign there and then save the cost of the note of paying a notary to come to us?"
Absolutely.
It's at the end, everybody always wants to save a few bucks here and there. So
Yes.
is it actually more cost effective for them to do that?
Absolutely. And actually, it's my preference as an escrow officer. It's my preference to have a face-to-face communication with my principals, because 9 out of 10 times I'm answering most of their questions that they don't get answered by other parties, right? Like their insurance agent, or they don't understand the process. So I rather them sit down with me. Sometimes our loan officer will show up and they will sit down next to me. And the loan officer is explaining the loan documentation, which is great because that saves them their loan signing fee. So their loan officer is already charging an origination fee and loan charges for that work. So I sometimes ask the loan officer to be present at my signings. That way I can just explain my escrow documents to the buyer, and then they can explain their documents to the buyer. And then all the buyer has to pay for is the actual $15 per notarization fee. And they're not being charged $500 per loan document signing fee.
Wait, back it
Okay.
up, back it up. So what you're saying, Luisa, is if the loan officer is there, they don't have to get a loan signing notary?
That is correct.
Wow, interesting. I did not know that.
Yes, the loan signing agent is providing a service on behalf of the loan officer in a sense, because they're explaining the loan documentation to the buyer.
Okay.
So you're paying for that fee. That's separate from the actual state fee that's already been $15 per signature.
Right.
So if the buyer is coming into the office where and they're being explained by the escrow officer and the loan officer, then all they're really paying is a notary fee.
Gotcha. Okay, good information.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we only have a few minutes left. I did want to explain a few things that I've noticed and that will also make your escrows go smoother. When you're opening an escrow around a weekend or a holiday, keep that in mind that that's going to shorten up your timeline, and it's going to handicap your transaction in the beginning when you have a lot of things going on. So if you do have a choice, or if you can just talk with the other agent and decide on, do we want to open it this Friday before a 3-day weekend when we're already going to be behind, or do we want to wait until after the weekend? A lot of times they want to get the transaction going as quickly as possible, but if you just talk to them about the possible delays that you're going to encounter in that time frame, that can make things go a little bit smoother. And if you can maybe decide to wait until after the holiday, sometimes that will make it smoother as well. You have to accommodate the signing, because your contract date is the date that your contract is signed, not the day you open escrow. So if you wanted to wait until Monday to open escrow, then have those acceptance documents dated for that Monday. You can do that, but it's all about communication and talking to the other party or the other agent to your transaction, and your escrow officer, and that open communication can help greatly. So just to wrap it up, any last questions for Luisa?
I do have one more question, Luisa. If the opening escrow packet isn't sent out until the earnest money is in office, if there's a delay in receiving that earnest money, say beyond the 3 days, such as like 5 days, will that delay your timeline.
No, because I'm still within that 5 to 7 day timeline on the RPA. So escrow has technically between from the time they receive the deposit to the time of the contingency, it's 5 to 7 days. So I still have that timeline to provide my typed escrow instructions, but I don't like to wait that long.
Right.
I want them out as soon as possible so I can have everyone reviewing documents as soon as possible. But we're still within our timeline per the RPA, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, just as a rule of thumb, we always want to make sure, that within that 3 to 7 day, you're doing all your follow-ups. Do we have escrow instructions signed? Have they sent in their deposit? Let's communicate with escrow. So just remember that 1 week, that first week is very crucial to communicate with escrow to make sure that there's no delays on the escrow money, the earnest money deposit, and also the escrow instructions.
Okay. All right.
I have
All right.
a touch point real quick, just real quick to add into kind of what Bobby was saying and these time periods and everything. I know for me, I know most lenders feel this way. If you are going into a holiday weekend, or even if not, if it's like Friday at after 3 p.m., I mean, it could be even like 2 p.m. If you get that contract and it's sent over from a lender's perspective, that's Monday. Nothing's happening on that, and then you're losing 3 days or 2 days right off. Well, 3 days because it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then Monday is the work day. So if there's not an urgency, like, oh, this has to be open. I know some like to open because it's like the last couple days of the month and they want it for their numbers, like for the month, but you're hurting your time frame by doing it Friday at like 3-4 o'clock because it's realistically not counting for us until Monday.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. That
Thank you.
was great having your perspective. That's great. This worked out good. All right, so I'm going to put together the additional documents that are going to help when you have a listing or even when you're working with a buyer to get to include with your contract when you open escrow so that we can have the smoothest escrows in town.
Yes, I mean, ideally, we would want to be a few steps ahead. Whichever party you're representing, you want to be a few steps ahead. So that's
Right.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't doubt everyone. Just shoot me an email right away or a text or a voicemail. I'm free to answer any questions and just explain the process. Sometimes I'm just playing the messenger. I'm 9 out of 10 times I'm waiting on other people. So I can't puppeteer unless I have what I need to puppeteer. So just when in doubt, always communicate with me and ask me and say, hey, have you heard from the buyer? Or hey, has my seller reached out to you? Or hey, has this person gotten back to you? Or if also if sometimes I have lenders that don't want to communicate with escrow and they just want to go directly to the agents or vice versa, and then they're not incorporating something that's escrow related or money related. As a rule of thumb, always make sure to just ask escrow. Because sometimes we know stuff behind the scenes that you guys don't know. We hear from the lender before the principals hear from the lender. So it's always, as a rule of thumb, just ask escrow. Yeah.
Okay.
Luisa, one last question. Thank you so much. I know every escrow officer is a little bit different, and you're new, so I just wanted to ask, what's your ideal preference in people sending out stuff to you, not necessarily documents, but like a question or like an update? Do you want them calling you and leaving you a voicemail? Do you want them texting you? Do you want an email? Like, what's going to be the way that you see it fastest and it's easiest to communicate back?
Yes, that would be for me, everything in writing. So email would be ideal for me.
Okay.
Back in the day, we didn't have email, it was fax and letters. I would receive a letter through Messenger or a fax. Now we have email, which is quicker, so the communication is quicker and we have everything in writing. Not just that, but it helps everyone take accountability as well. So I really do prefer email. That way I can see where everyone's at and I can also chime in on certain things if it does belong to me. Sometimes I get CC'd on everything, and if it doesn't pertain to me, I just say in receipt, thank you, but I don't necessarily have to work on certain items. But email is always preference, everything in writing, anything in writing, whether there's a Post-it note, and if you decide to leave a Post-it note on my computer, that Post-it note has to be in the file because it's in writing.
Thank
So
you.
we keep, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, so next week we're going to go back to the RPA. We're going to do the second half of the RPA. So please don't miss that. And I will send out the recording of this training to you in the next couple of days. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it very much and have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
See you
guys.
later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. This is great.